Alright, we are back with a new video, and we are back updating the Big Brother 24 power rankings towards the end of week 9. And this is a pretty interesting power ranking to get into here, as obviously we're about to have yet another double eviction. But despite it seeming like a straightforward set of possible outcomes at the beginning of the week, we have seen in recent days some pretty interesting gameplay happen to where at this point, I'm not entirely sure what's going to happen at this double, but I'm going to do my best to break it all down and rank these players accordingly. But as usual, there are 8 players to talk about, and let's get right into the video. So starting off at number 8, we have the person who was most recently evicted from the house, and here we have Kyle. And obviously this was to be expected given everything that happened leading into last Thursday. And on the whole, I feel like Kyle played a very interesting game where there are plenty of points where he had plenty of control, and there are plenty of merits you can point to with this game. Like, I feel like he deserves the most credit for the creation of the Leftovers Alliance in a position that really flipped the game into his favor, where despite him already being in a somewhat good position, he was able to effectively flip the game on the Amira side of things and take control from that point on. And I feel like there are certainly points where he was the best positioned in the house from that point on, particularly towards the end of the Festy Bessie twist. But obviously along the way, we also saw some pretty messy gameplay from him as well, particularly with his relationship with Alyssa, which ranged from him being pretty hot and cold with her to him like trying to focus on his game while she was trying to get into a showmance with him. There was obviously him refusing to take his part and go up on the block during the Festy Bessie twist to get out Daniel. And it was basically him having to be backdoored in order for that plan to go through, so that wasn't ideal. And we obviously saw him orchestrate this move during the split house twist that allowed him to take out Joseph there. And coming into the week where he was taken out, he could have taken control from there, where he was obviously in control of Turner's HOH early on, getting him on track to take that shot at the remaining leftover group. But then obviously he was outed due to his perception of there being a Cookout 2.0, which was ultimately knocked to his gain. The fact that he had this assumption to begin with, despite the fact that there wasn't too much evidence pointing towards it, like it was just sort of a weird, racially motivated assumption for him, and for him to double down on that and to continue making these moves, while it did put him in a spot to where he could benefit to a degree, it obviously could have been deployed by Michael, even if he had gotten to the end, to where he could have spoiled his chances of winning. And that's another thing about Kyle, is his jury management was not ideal, to where even before the Cookout stuff came out, we had already heard people like an Indy, a Jasmine, even a Joseph say that they don't respect Kyle's gameplay. And had Kyle gotten to the end, even if the Cookout stuff was never revealed, he would have had a really tough time winning a jury vote there. So on the whole, I find Kyle's game to be pretty up and down, where there are plenty of high points that you can point to where he was playing a somewhat good game, but there are enough major flaws with this game that obviously explain his downfall, but obviously make him not the best player in the world, but certainly one of the more effective ones from this season. But considering he was just evicted here, I do have to leave him here at number 8. And with that, there are 7 players left in the game to talk about, and as usual, I'll be ranking them based on how likely it is that they'll win the game from this point. But at number 7, we have the person who is the most likely to be evicted come Thursday night, and here we have Terrence. And the fact that Terrence is the one who's going to be going out here, despite the fact that Michael came into this week as one of the biggest targets left in the game, despite Michael knowing that he would need to win out from this point, and despite knowing that Terrence, yes, while having won an HOH and a veto, was probably not going to be the biggest threat to Michael in those endgame cons compared to like a Monty and a Turner. Despite all that, the fact that Michael still chose to target Terrence of all people really speaks to how mind-blowing this all is. And it's obviously not great on Terrence's end that he was unable to convince Michael to save him in a spot to where it probably would have benefited Michael's game to keep Terrence around. Now, obviously, Terrence was probably not going to win, even if he had gotten to the end. As I explained earlier, again, he didn't necessarily have the best relationships in the world, and I don't really have too much faith in him winning out in some of these endgame comps against someone like a Michael, despite him having a resume of comp wins. But the fact that he is still being taken out here, despite the fact that he was unable to convince Michael to do what was in his best interest. This was obviously pretty bad on Terrence's end, and a big reason that he's here at number 7. Now moving on to number 6, and this is where things start to get a little weird, as I alluded to at the beginning of the video, we are about to head into a double eviction here. And despite us coming to the week to where there really was only one of 3 possible outcomes here, that being either Michael wins the veto, takes himself down, Brittany wins HOH and ensures that Michael doesn't go up at all, or someone else wins HOH, Michael doesn't win veto and is voted out pretty handily there. But now at this point, we've seen enough gameplay happen to where that's probably not going to happen. Now there is still a chance, I mean, particularly if some of the players don't see the double eviction coming and they sort of get caught up in the moment. But based on what's been happening in recent days, it does seem like this double eviction now is pretty up in the air. And I feel like a lot of what will happen is going to be dependent on who wins HOH, who wins the veto. And through that, there's a lot of uncertainty over who's safe coming into this week, which is weird because the person I have at number 6 is probably the safest person coming into the double eviction. I don't see any scenario where this person goes out in the double. And even going beyond that, this person is the most responsible for creating this chaos per se. This person was the most active in making it so that Michael's probably not going to be going out in the double. However, this person is not going to win a jury vote. But here at number 6, we do have Brittany. And as I said, Brittany was probably the most active person in creating this situation here, where obviously she recognizes the fact that she's probably not going to win the game at this point. And while this is something that she has alluded to earlier, she has now sort of been playing the game as if she's going to be taken to the end and lose. And ideally, at this point, she wants Michael to win more than herself to win, which has really motivated a lot of her gameplay here. Now, granted, some of this was also due to self-preservation, to where she recognizes that if Michael were to win the veto, that there is a chance that someone could take her out instead and sort of make her that collateral damage. So on to that end, she did do this preservation as well, but through that, she really was able to turn the tide here by creating this women's alliance with Brittany and Taylor, and along with that, sort of create this gender war coming into this double eviction here, where we have the Alyssa, Taylor, and Brittany side being willing to go after the Monty and Turners. And in return, we see Monty and Turner sort of react to that by sticking together and encouraging Michael to help them out here by winning some of the comps and in turn protecting them. Now, through that, we basically are now in a position to where Michael and Brittany are 2 of the safest people in the house coming into the double eviction. And with Michael being more likely to be taken out than Brittany, it sort of put Brittany in this ideal spot to where people assume that she is someone who is not going to win the game, and therefore there isn't much use in her being taken out, especially when there does seem to be this division happening between the men and the women. And I do give Brittany the bulk of the credit here, but at the end of the day, she is not winning the game. She is doing this all under the guise of helping Michael win the game, or as she's presenting it to everyone else, she's trying to help them potentially win the game instead. And I would give her a bit more credit here if maybe she was a secret jury threat and she was trying to downplay her threat level. But at the end of the day, I mean, I don't think she is that big of a jury threat either. I mean, she hasn't necessarily had the best jury management up to this point. I feel like the way she's handled people like an Indian Jasmine has not been ideal. And on top of that, I feel like at this point, too many people either don't respect her or they just see her as following Michael along and trying to protect Michael. And yes, while she does deserve a lot of credit here for getting the target off Michael and by extension her, I feel like if she gets to the end of the game, people won't recognize that and they'll instead give the win to someone else. And on top of that, we had Terrence leaving the game this week, who again is probably one of the few people that would lose to her at the end of the game. So through all that, I can't have Brittany any higher than here, simply because I don't think she is likely to win the game, even if she gets to the end. But considering how active her gameplay is, and considering the fact that she was able to make herself the safest person coming into this double, I do have to recognize that to some degree, but she's not winning. So because of that, I do have her here at number 6. Now we're moving on to number 5, and we are moving from one of the safer people coming to the stubble to one of the more vulnerable people. And here we have Alyssa. And again, I feel like Alyssa should be in a better position here, considering the fact that she just lost Kyle, and she did technically build a relationship with Turner before Kyle left the house, to where that should theoretically keep her safe here. But now with the stuff that's been happening in recent days, I feel like Alyssa is now not in the best position here coming into this double, to where we obviously see Turner kind of burn his relationship with her. There isn't really much there at this point. And with this divide happening, I could see a world where Alyssa does go home this week, particularly if Monty and Turner win the HOH, and if Michael were to win the veto. I feel like there is plenty of avenues for Alyssa to go home here. And I feel like, unlike the other people that are vulnerable coming into this double, I feel like Alyssa, again, does need to be against certain people to win the game. Now, granted, I feel like her jury chances are a bit understated at the end of the day. I feel like she does have people in the jury that would be at least sympathetic to her. I don't know if they would necessarily vote for her per se. And I feel like with Kyle coming to the jury now, I feel like he definitely could hold some sway with them in that regard. So I do feel like Alyssa can win a jury vote if she gets to the end. But again, I feel like she would need to be against the right people. I feel like she would obviously win against Brittany, of course. I think she could potentially win against Michael, depending on how effective Terrence or certain other people will be at turning the jury against him, which, spoiler alert, I don't think is going to be super likely at the time being. And against Turner, I feel like it's going to be a bit more up in the air, but I would assume she loses that. So at the end of the day, I don't think Alyssa is necessarily the best position to win a jury vote, but I don't think she's dead in the water either. But considering how much danger she is coming into this double, I can't have her too much higher than here. So I have her here at number 5. Now we're moving on to number 4, and I feel like this person has arguably played this individual week worse than Alyssa. But again, I feel like this person has a bit more outs coming into the double. But here we have Turner. And the fact that Turner is not a target coming into this week is a bit baffling at the end of the day. Now, some of that is because Michael specifically promised him safety, how he doesn't want to punish Turner for doing the right thing last week by backdooring Kyle, despite, again, that being really bad for his game. Again, I do have to give Turner at least a little bit of credit in that he was able to get Michael to uphold that end of the deal. But I also feel like he did some not great stuff this past week either, namely him distancing himself from Alyssa after it seemed like he could have picked her up after Kyle left the house, but he just seemed to drop out to the point where I do worry that could come back to bite him if he's on the block and Alyssa is a vote there. So there's that. Obviously, we saw him and Monty talking about wanting to work with Michael after it turns out that Brittany is rallying a lot of the women against them, which is really bizarre to me in that they're really going out of their way to protect Michael here, despite Michael coming to this week as one of the biggest threats left in the game, simply due to his comp abilities. So obviously that's a question mark there. But the main thing I will give Turner is, again, his comp ability coming into the double. I feel like Turner is probably one of the more likely people to win the HOH coming into the double. And I feel like next to Michael, he is, again, the most proven competitor out there, to where I feel like Turner could clutch it out if he is put on the block there. However, he is still going to be in some danger. I feel like if anyone other than him or Monty win the HOH, he's probably going to touch the block at least. And there is a chance he goes home depending on who he's up against. Like if he's against Monty, he for sure goes home. And even against someone like a Brittany, again, he also goes home there. So he's not in an ideal spot coming into this double. And I feel like there is an argument that he played this individual week worse than Alyssa. But simply the fact that I feel more confident in him to win the veto or the HOH to get himself out of this tricky spot than Alyssa, that does make me put him a little bit higher, and he's here at number 4. Now we're moving on to number 3, and this is someone who, again, could be in some danger if certain comp results happen, but I also feel like this person is probably less in danger than Alyssa or Turner. But here we have Taylor. And Taylor's sort of in a weird spot at this point, to where obviously coming into the week, she probably would have benefited quite a bit from other people taking the shot at Michael. But now where we stand, she's probably the only person that would actually try to target Michael if she were to win HOH during the double here. And it's sort of weird because if Michael ends up going out in this next round, I feel like she could be in some danger there, in that there wouldn't be much of a target to have ahead of her. And plus, when you consider her story, the fact that she has been this underdog throughout a lot of the season, I feel like that will be something that could harm her chances of getting towards the end of the game. Not to mention the fact that with Brittany now trying to make all these final two deals with people, I feel like that could also jeopardize Taylor's position to a degree as well. Also, her connection to Monty is something that could get her into some trouble as well. But admittedly, compared to someone like an Alyssa or Turner, I feel like there are fewer scenarios where Taylor would go up on the block and would go home there. So at least there's that. But at the end of the day, I'm still not feeling super confident about Taylor's ability to survive moving forward. So because of that, I do have her here at number 3. Now we're moving on to number 2, and we actually have the same top 2 as last week. And it's actually the same order as well. But at number 2, we do have Monty. And similar to Turner, I feel like it's really baffling that Michael isn't trying to target Monty here, especially when he does seem to be one of the bigger comp threats here heading into this endgame. And now the fact that he seems to be in a position to want to work with Michael moving forward is a bit baffling. Now, again, we could definitely see things change, particularly once it comes out that it is a double. I mean, who knows what could happen there, but it does seem from the moment that Monty would keep around Michael and would try to go after the Alyssas at the end of the day. And I feel like that is something that could benefit him. I also feel like Monty is a bit more likely to win a jury vote than Turner, so I feel like that's another thing going in his favor. And I also think Monty is a bit more likely to stay over Turner if they were to be stuck on the block together come to the doubles. So I feel like those are enough merits to put Monty here above Turner and really a lot of other people here. But it's still the fact that he doesn't really benefit too much from keeping Michael around at this point, especially given how big of a comp threat Michael is, which does make me leave him here at number 2. And now, at number 1, the person I believe is the most likely to win Big Brother 24 right now is Michael. And I feel very weird putting Michael at number 1 again here this week, where there is obviously a pretty big knock to the fact that he won HOH here in a position to where obviously the next round will be a double and he can't compete in the HOH for that. So he basically only had one chance getting into the double to really save himself there. Obviously the fact that if he were to immediately win the HOH, that he wouldn't compete in Final 4 HOH, which again would obviously only give him one shot at veto there. So obviously that's not ideal, but again, he has to win out from this point, which is obviously a problem in threat management, but again, he has shown his ability there. Beyond that, his decision to not target Monty or Turner is really suboptimal in my opinion, where I kind of get why, in that he feels like it would be bad jury management for him to quote unquote punish Turner for doing the right thing by backdooring Kyle when it was completely against his game, because like it was the right thing to do. But honestly, I don't think the jury's going to care that much that Michael didn't target Turner here, as I feel like if they really were going to care about Michael's timing with revealing the information about Kyle, that obviously his decision to not target Turner the very next week is probably not going to change it anyway. So I feel like that alone is probably a half measure at best. But even beyond that, I mean, I feel like the fact that Michael knows he has to win out from this point, the fact that he is keeping around Monty and Turner, two people who are much bigger competition threats to him, and the two people that would get in the way of him winning his way to the end, which again is his only viable strategy at this point, is suboptimal. And the fact that he's taking out Terrence to do this is not great either. Now, obviously, we saw Terrence also talk to Michael about how he would try to poison the jury if he was evicted this week, which I don't feel like is as big of a knock here, despite what I just said about the jury situation, because we obviously see Michael being one of the more proactive people in trying to have good jury management. And I feel like by Terrence revealing to Michael that he would try to turn the jury against him, obviously we heard Michael intend to acknowledge that in his veto speech to not use the veto here, knowing the fact that the jury would be able to watch the veto speech. So I feel like through that, Michael is effectively able to counter that by saying to the jury that if Terrence does attempt to turn them against him, that it would be out of this place of bitterness. And obviously the fact that Terrence is probably not going to be that persuasive to the jury anyway. So take that as you will. But I feel like outside that, the fact that he didn't target Turner this week or Monty is pretty suboptimal and really opened him up to be the next big target here. Where again, the fact that he's not going to be competing in the double eviction HOH means he only had one chance at winning the veto. And considering the fact that double eviction vetoes tend to happen really fast and you're not going to be able to prepare for them too much, I mean, it really did seem kind of worrying, like that he may not be able to pull it off here. But then we have Brittany, who was effectively able to protect him this week by being able to play around him and through that be able to build this divide between the men and the women to the point where Monty and Turner approach Michael and say that they want to work with him. Now, granted, how much of that is like just for the moment, like how loyal will they truly be to that? We'll have to see what happens when the double eviction actually happens. But for the time being, it does seem like Monty and Turner would be able to go along with this and in turn would target the Alyssa side things if they were to win HOH. But even then, Brittany was the one to do this. And Michael was even annoyed at Brittany when she was doing all this game playing for him that essentially protects him moving forward. And yes, well, it's good that Michael eventually acknowledges that he would rather Brittany win HOH than anyone else. Like the fact that he was not proactive in doing this, and obviously the fact that Brittany, he had to rely on Brittany to do all this gameplay so that he would not be the immediate target coming into the double is not great either. But at the end of the day, I feel like all this helps Michael in that despite him not being super active in protecting himself, despite him not making the correct strategic move in terms of his target during his HOH, he is still in the best position to win the game moving forward. Again, I still feel very confident in his competition ability. I still feel like he has a lot of potential to win out moving forward. And despite all this talk about him not doing well in a jury vote, I still feel like he probably would gain the respect of a jury if he were to get to the end, where I feel like he would probably win against everyone except Monty and possibly Taylor. So I still feel like Michael is one of the bigger threats to win the game here, both from his comp ability, but also from him managing the jury somewhat effectively. And yes, while there are plenty of pitfalls for him, I still feel like compared to everyone else, he is the most likely to win Big Brother 24. And it's for those reasons that I have him here at number 1. And there we go. That will do it for this week's video. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out with the channel. Now, obviously, I'll be back next week following the double eviction, where we'll obviously break down what happened there. So stay tuned for that. Obviously, the Survivor 43 cast came out not too long ago. We are now in the preseason for 43, which is pretty exciting. So stay tuned for content on that. Amazing Race is starting up soon, so I plan to cover that show as well. And if you haven't already, be sure to join my Discord server. I'll leave a link to join in the description. There's a lot of stuff coming your way. But for now, that's the video. See ya.